So ZOMGitsCriss posted up a video just yesterday, and it was a pretty good video. I haven't seen a video from her in a long time. And it was on agnosticism and atheism, and she was suggesting that she's uncomfortable with the claim that those two positions are basically collapsible, and she wanted to disidentify with the suggestion that she's basically just an agnostic. And she was sort of, showing how a lot of people imagine that they can just deny atheism by claiming that it's an agnosticism, and sort of, the line of the argument is basically, look, you don't have evidence, you don't have proof, and because you don't have proof, you really just don't know. And she was saying, look, I'm not talking about atheism as I don't have sufficient evidence for the claim and this sort of stuff. She says, look, I don't believe. It's more than just not believing in the supernatural. It's saying, look, there is no such thing as the supernatural. There is no God. There are no gods. And that's the atheist position she's after. And she tries to say, look, I'm not being dogmatic. That's her claim. She says, look, I'm not being dogmatic. I'm simply trying to say that too much open-mindedness starts to fall into a slippery slope where it's like atheism as a position is being denied, and it's sort of, I guess, annexed into the agnostic position. And I think all of that is a point well taken. And I do think there are differences between a truly atheist position and an agnostic position. And I do think she tried to safeguard, I guess as best one can, by claiming that it's not a dogmatism, that she's not saying that she knows for a fact, but that she's claiming, that there is no evidence, and she would be willing to revise should sufficient evidence come in. I mean, I think she was sort of saying like that, but it's not like she's holding out with a kind of agnosticism. So again, there's a sort of a fine line she's drawing in trying to claim that she's not giving a dogmatic claim about the issue. I guess from my own perspective, I mean, and sort of here's maybe partly what's in there is, people want to say, well, how do you know that there isn't, a God, and that, we don't have the evidence, but maybe it's beyond what we've been able to test, and people are doing this. And I think it sort of starts with people going, how do you know God is a man? Maybe God is a woman, and maybe God doesn't sit on a throne. Maybe God rides a unicorn, and maybe God eats rainbows for breakfast. I mean, you can start getting into all this kind of goofy stuff, and if people say, well, that wasn't the God that I had in mind, they say, well, yeah, but God could be this or God could be that. From my own perspective, okay, I think here's the way to address some of the dogmatism and some of the concerns, okay? And I would love to see, in all honesty, I would just love to see a sort of response to this, okay? From my own sense, one would need to begin with the question of what does one mean by God? What could one mean? What ought one mean? What is it possible to mean by God? Does it have to be something supernatural? Does it have to be a creator? I mean, can't those just be outdated modes of thinking? So notions of a creator God who's concerned about humans and who makes deals with people and intervenes and is a being of some sort, maybe all of those are just outdated. Maybe those are the wrong kinds of questions. Maybe different kinds of questions would be questions like, could consciousness have not been? Is there a spiritual significance in the fact that there not only is all that there is, whatever all this stuff is, but that part of what is aware of what is? I mean, what is the meaning of the very possibility that the cosmos is more than a materiality, more than a sheer substance, but some kind of self-conscious substance? Now, if you say that the universe doesn't have a consciousness, there's a sense in which I think I agree, but there's another sense in which, I am part of the universe, and if I'm conscious of the universe, then the universe itself is conscious, if only that I am that through which the universe becomes conscious of itself. Each person, each organism, all bodies that are alive in some way open to the larger world around them, and they're one of those possibilities. I think a hardline atheist position is not only that consciousness could have not been, but that it's a fluke and that it doesn't in any way fulfill or complete the inorganic world of matter. If I say that there is a world of matter that would have been for lack of a better word, insufficient without emergence. Now, it's not an anthropocentric position. I'm not saying that humans somehow complete it. I'm saying sentience. I'm saying everything about the orderliness of the world. The world's orderliness bespeaks of all of the possibilities of consciousness itself. And I think part of the question becomes religious experiences. Why were there religious experiences in this organism? I mean, what is it about the nature of organisms on this planet such that when a certain level of sophistication emerges, religious experiences become possible? I mean, of all of the different kinds of fruit, of all of the different kinds of flowers, of all the different kinds of animals, the different kinds of vegetation, I mean, why is there this thing called a religious experience? I mean, where did it come from? Is it just the product of imagination? Well, if it's just the product of imagination, where did that come from? And it doesn't mean, when I say where does it come from, I don't mean like there is a guy there that created it, but maybe all of that logic is wrong. I mean, maybe the question becomes, what ought one mean by God? Now, I mean, in the video, ZOMGitsCriss basically says, look, atheists do not pray. And this is what I think was a very interesting line, because I think it's as if she was suggesting that if you pray, you have to be praying to a guy, like there has to be a being who would hear and respond to the prayers. I don't know that that's true. See, I don't think that we're really addressing what language is, how language is a socio-historical phenomena more than simply a organic, natural one. See, babies, they babble out of, they come out of the womb, and soon enough they'll be babbling, and there is a babbling period, but the baby doesn't come out of the womb and soon enough just start speaking the language. No, they'll learn the language from those others around them, and so there's a socio-historical dependence upon the organism. The organism falls into historicity. And what is historicity? Now, a person might say, well, historicity is, again, it's a natural phenomena. I'm going to agree with that. I think history is. But history is a qualitatively different kind of phenomena than other kinds of organic process. That is, historicity is, for many people, a kind of spirituality because it relies upon the eidetic realm and the realm of language, that it's not simply an expression of genes, right? Now, there is some sense in which your capacity to learn a language is an expression of your genes, but the particular language you learn is subject to the history you've fallen into. It's not just coming out of the genes. Okay? But there's even further a problem of the way that people think about language. When people think about all language as if it were a transitive verb, they miss it. This is why, Judaic mystic positions like Martin Buber are so robust. When you start to move to I and thou, it has to do with an attitude of the human. The religious is a certain kind of attitude that grows in an organism that has increasing levels of compassion, forgiveness, and experiences of love and, again, gratitude for the larger world, for their very being. They can recognize their own existence almost as if it were an object encapsulated and be grateful for it. It's as if the religious is the emergence of a context for self-understanding. It's an emergence of a context for self-understanding. And so, again, so let's go to this issue of the transitive verbs. If I say the boy hit the ball, there's an object that receives my action. If I say, I wrote a letter to so-and-so, there's me writing a letter to someone. But when I take an expression like the rose blooms, right? There, the action of the rose doesn't have an object. That is, the action terminates within its own activity. And you could say the same thing when people pray. They don't necessarily pray to a being. Praying could be like a rose blooming. It has to do with the kinds of self-relation that are possible in a speaking organism who, once it's become subject to history, now has to navigate its own life in terms of what's sometimes called conscience. See, conscience and self-relation are very related. And they're very related to the fall into history. That is, an organism who is unable to learn how to speak and unable to learn its culture's language. Not only are the parents alarmed, but we don't hold this person subject to the same kinds of laws. We say they didn't know what they were doing. The ability to know right from wrong and the experience of conscience, these are all the emergence of a certain kind of context for self-understanding, and it comes from the certain kind of temporality that people experience. Now, again, my guess is that some of this sounds like, it's maybe too academic, or people saying, what is the point of this? Well, the point is that there are different ways of thinking about spirituality and what ought one mean by God. If one says, what I mean by God is the orderliness by which self-relation and conscience becomes possible, and it's that larger context of self-understanding as it emerges in organisms that reach a certain level of sophistication. I don't think any of that needs a creator. I don't think any of it needs ultimate justice. I don't think any of it needs divine intervention or burning bushes or any religious dogma at all. I think what it does require, though, is an appreciation of the absolute mystery of the ground of our being. And I don't just mean the fact that there's something rather than nothing. That's interesting. I'm more interested in, was it inevitable that part of the something that is would become aware of the fact that it is? Why is finitude, that is, why is that which is finite self-aware? It would seem somewhat like a spiritual and or a cosmological question. That is, consciousness and the experience of conscience, they can be wholly natural phenomena, but they lead us into spiritual connections with other people. And by that I mean they're not based in any kind of biological survival value, but notions of love and compassion and forgiveness and gratitude. They become possible by way of that context of self-understanding. I think to simply shake a finger at people and say, well, you don't have any evidence for God, if by evidence for God you mean like some sort of Geiger counter or some sort of scientific measure, I think that's point well taken. But if you're going to only go to the realm of feeling and to the way that people act based upon their feelings, I think there's ample evidence that people have feelings of love and gratitude for others, and somehow that comes out of religious sentiment. Okay, I would love to hear some response to some of that. Okay, thank you.